Another strain of metaphysical thought with its roots in scientific inquiry was the idea of emergent properties, or emergentism. Originally propounded by George Lewis and carried forward by John Stuart Mill, emergentism focused not on whether causes exist per se, but rather on the complexity and irreducibility of their effects. Emergentism tried to make sense of effects that can't be adequately accounted for by their causes. Put crudely, something has emergent properties when those properties are more than the sum of the properties of its parts.
All organized bodies are composed of parts, similar to those composing inorganic nature, and which have even themselves existed in an inorganic state. But the phenomena of life, which results from the juxtaposition of those parts in a certain manner, bear no analogy to any of the effects which would be produced by the action of the component substances considered as mere physical agents.
Well, on the emergentist view, there's reality is really layered. So at the fundamental level, you might have something like elementary particles. The idea is when the elementary particles come into certain sorts of configurations, fundamental new properties then emerge. And so as you get various complex structures of objects, new fundamental properties can emerge, and you get a layered view of reality. You put these particulars together in this sort of combination, you get brand new properties.
In the emergentist view, reality is layered, and the upper layers emerge from, and can't be reduced to, the lower levels. For example, some contemporary philosophers contend that the phenomenon of consciousness isn't reducible to the firing of neurons in the brain. Instead, consciousness is an emergent characteristic of brain activity. The bewildering complexity of the physical world that captivated emergentists also led philosophers to wonder how to reconcile the scientific view of the world with ordinary human experience. While the data indicate that the universe is defined by Einsteinian relativity and quantum theory, our everyday lives are emphatically Newtonian. The philosopher Wilfrid Sellars claimed that the appropriate project for metaphysics is to bring together the world we encounter with the world as described by science.
The aim of philosophy is to understand how things in the broadest possible sense of the term hang together in the broadest possible sense of the term.
Sellars saw that our experience of commonplace objects, chairs, cars, people, seems at odds with the scientific view that things are wholly composed of molecules, atoms, quarks, and so on. He wondered how we could square our experience of time with relativity, which claims that reality is an intricately woven tapestry of time and space. Sellars wanted to know, is the image of the world that our senses perceive describing the same reality as the scientific image?
So, for example, the manifest image is of a world that has colors. So one of the projects would then be to try to find out how to locate colors in the world as described by science. So are colors, for example, some sort of light property of surfaces? Obviously, the mind-body problem's involved here because part of the manifest image is the idea of persons who have mental abilities and so on. And what we want to do is to see how to locate those mental abilities within the image of the world that's provided by science. Of course, what's most difficult to do in that case is to show how conscious phenomena fit into the world as described by science.
Figuring out how consciousness fits into the world is one of the seminal challenges of metaphysics. Can consciousness be fully explained by the activity of the brain? Or is the emergent view more accurate, that our conscious life, with all its richness of thought and experience, cannot be accounted for by the mass of neurons in our skulls?
For the metaphysician, consciousness raises the most intriguing kind of challenge into the question whether everything depends in a very strong way on just physics. One picture that has really gripped contemporary metaphysicians is the idea that there really isn't much to the world beyond physics. Fix physics, and you fix the rest. If God laid out the physical carpet of the world, the atoms and electrons, he'll have done everything. You know, if you put the little bits in a certain array, you've done enough to make a chair. If you put the little bits in a certain array, you've done enough to make an economic system. If you've put the little bits in a certain array, you've done enough to make life.
If we are indeed nothing more than a collection of particles, then the operation of our minds is as susceptible to the laws of nature as balls on a billiard table. In other words, our actions are predestined, and our cherished capacity for free will is merely an illusion. Here the metaphysics of mind has obvious and profound implications in ethics and political philosophy. If a person's behavior, or that of a society, is externally determined, how can anyone be held accountable for their actions? Yet the experience of consciousness seems to set us apart in some way from other entities in the natural world.
Seems to be something very fundamental about us, that we're conscious. In Thomas Nagel's lingo, there's something that it's like to be us. You know, if we looked at say this rug or a chair and asked, well, what is it like to be it? People would realize we were deeply confused. There's nothing that it's like to be a chair. I mean, there are things we could say about the chair, but there's nothing that it's like to be it. By contrast, if we feel that there's something that it's like, and it feels like we don't, in my case, I think I know there's something that it's like to be me, and I suspect there's something that it's like to be a cat and a dog. And as we go down the chain of life, we become less and less sure. We're not sure. We're pretty sure there's nothing that it's like to be a stone, that there's nothing that it's like to be a rock.